Following the government's resignation last night, sunrise this morning in Lebanon may finally bring the country its very first tenuous step towards a proper democracy. The massive explosion in the capital Beirut a week ago has brought into sharp focus not only the destruction brought on to its population now, but the crisis of political turmoil, corrupt government and economic freefall over many, many years. And all of this amidst rising infection rates of COVID-19. Joining us a little bit more to tell us about the situation, or to tell us a little bit more about the situation on the ground, we have a South African who's living in Beirut, or just outside of Beirut, Mia Verdoorn Shammes. Mia, thanks very much for joining us. It's good to have you on the program.
Good morning, Leanne. Thank you for having me.
What's it been like living in Lebanon? I mean, you know, when that explosion took place, let's begin there last week. Where were you? What was it like since that dreadful day?
Well, up until Tuesday, tensions were already running very high in the country with our economic collapse, as you mentioned, with COVID-19 and the rising numbers on that. And we were here at home. It was 6:10 at night. And we live about 10 kilometers outside of the city, but we heard everything as if it happened right here. I mean, I cannot imagine what people must have felt in Beirut if we felt it so heavily up here. And right now, everyone is still in shock. I mean, it's been a week since this travesty, and people can still not believe that this has happened.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about the magnitude of something like that, I mean, we've been speaking about it and trying to imagine what it was like, just going on with your daily lives, and suddenly an explosion such as this happens. And I mean, you know, to have reports that people in Cyprus actually felt that's a good 200 k's away, if not 160 k's away from Lebanon. I mean, this is just, you know, you look for reasons, and the reasons that keep coming up is pure negligence.
Exactly. To put it into context for you, if I had to compare it, say it happened in Johannesburg, say this explosion happened in Sandton, the windows in OR Tambo would have exploded. That's the magnitude of the damage and the scale. I mean, we had windows breaking here and we're just 10 kilometers away. So the fact that they felt it in Cyprus as an earthquake should just give you an idea.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about the lead up to this, because, you know, this is years and years. This didn't just happen overnight, and it was not just an accident. This was something that could have been avoided, but it wasn't. So, you know, the ground swelling that's been happening up, we've seen protests that started at the end of last year. This led to a change of leadership, or a change of faces in leadership. I'm not sure if the actual leadership changed, but, you know, what's going on? What is brewing?
So to give you a background, just a quick background about the Lebanese government, the Lebanese society is very much a sectarian nature. A unique feature of the Lebanese system is this principle of the confessional distribution. So each religious community has an allotted number of deputies in the parliament. So all powers of governance and the spoils of the state have up until now been constitutionally or informally divided in a very careful balance between different Christian and Muslim sects. So that is a system that has brought, up until now, some semblance of stability in a highly diverse society. But at what price? Constant lack of accountability, corruption, misgovernance, and mistrust. And as of October 17th last year, the population of Lebanon simply had enough. And that is what sparked those protests. Initially, they wanted to impose a WhatsApp tax for international calls. You know, it just became more and more ridiculous, and that's what led people to stand up and rise up and protest against it. That meant that we had the cabinet resign back in October, and so we've had a new cabinet for the last 8 months. But a lot of people, as you said, felt that it was just a change of faces, not a change of anything tangible. And now last night, again, we had the cabinet, the Prime Minister and his cabinet resigning. And hopefully this is going to pave the way for early parliamentary elections, which will give the population a chance to break away from this confessional system into a more modern system, because Lebanon is the only country in the world that employs this confessional system.
Yeah. And this, obviously is what's brewing underneath everything. And so we see last night, as you mentioned, a mass resignation of the government. It's the second time this has happened now. But I mean, are people feeling more optimistic now? Obviously calling an early election, trying to create change. But what happens in the interim? Because, this is a long process.
It is. So the current cabinet, or the one that just resigned, will be maintaining a caretaker position up until a new prime minister is chosen, and he will then choose the cabinet. But a lot of people still feel hopeless. They don't believe that it will be a tangible change that could be felt. And this is exactly why we had another large protest on Saturday. It's been actually 3 consecutive days of protest. These people who have literally lost everything, they've lost homes, they've lost loved ones, they have no other way of expressing themselves than having a protest. And what do they have in return? They have tear gas, rubber bullets, and sometimes even live ammunition fired at them. That is exactly what happened on Saturday night.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about the average person and the lives and what it's like living in Lebanon at this stage. We look at the economic turmoil. I mean, I've been seeing articles that there's the increasing famine that's happening within Lebanon, that, the country is so dependent on imports. Now, the port is not there, and this is going to bring about food insecurity. This is, houses are destroyed. People don't have jobs. The unemployment rate is at one of the highest levels, and the issue of corruption keeps coming up as one of the biggest factors. In fact, I think it was yesterday when, I don't think it was the Prime Minister, when he handed his resignation, basically saying that corruption is bigger than the government. That's got to be a warning. That's got to be a warning to all countries.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, the state of the country in terms of the famine, I mean, we were feeling the pressure even before COVID hit. Lebanon had an artificial peg of 1,500 Lebanese lira or Lebanese pounds to the dollar. And imagine in South Africa, if the rand dollar now stands at 17.50, 17.28, so 17 rand to the dollar. And overnight, that number jumped from 17 to 80. That is how much we've lost in terms of value of the Lebanese pound. So you can imagine your purchasing power. And then on top of that, you have COVID, and the entire middle class of the Lebanese people is wiped out. They lose their jobs because every business has closed, every restaurant has closed. So you have this overnight shift, and the country could not handle the pressure. And now on top of this, we have this explosion where 300,000 families lose their homes. They thought they were staying safe by staying at home, and yet their homes get blown up.
Yeah. It's a very, very difficult situation to have to understand. When you're trying to live your life, and yet every force is against you, just trying to keep going. If we look at this moment now, do you think this is history in the making in terms of a turning point? The elections that they're calling for, will they be free? Will they be fair? Is this something that the people of Lebanon can rely on to change their fate of history?
Absolutely. I would always like to be the optimist, and I always want to look at the glass half full. I think what is different in this situation is that the eyes of the world are now more focused on Lebanon. We had President Emmanuel Macron from France here last Thursday. He was on the ground. He went to the blast site. He was walking around the main street that was heavily affected. He was talking to the victims' families, reassuring them that Lebanon is not alone and that he is going to personally help. He set up a donors conference on Sunday, and over $200 million was donated by different international parties. And so what we assume and what we think allegedly is that maybe this resignation last night from the cabinet was pressurized by the international community. Maybe there was a caveat in these donations saying that we will help you, but not unless you help yourself by changing the government and changing the status quo of how things are done. So hopefully, because of this, and doing interviews like this across the globe, and letting people know about the situation and opening up that conversation about Lebanon, the more we do it, the more we will see change.
Yeah, I've even seen warnings from a lot of people within Lebanon that have been, and it has been massive in terms of the reach of the message coming from within that country out to international organizations and donors who have put out a warning to say, whatever you do, if you want to help the country of Lebanon, do not go through the government, come directly to aid organizations and rather assist them as opposed to sending the money to the government, because it'll never get to the people. I mean, are these warnings true? Is it something that people should actually listen to?
Absolutely, 100%. The day after the blast, there were Lebanese civilians cleaning up the streets, Lebanese civilians and Lebanese youth in particular, going from home to home to help sweep up broken glass and help clear up debris. Not once did you see any government official helping out, picking up a broomstick, and generally just helping the people. It was all the civilian power that was doing it. So absolutely 100%. Those funds and those donations need to go to like the Lebanese Red Cross, these private institutions and NGOs, because those are the only ones that you can trust will actually do what they say. Unfortunately, it has gotten to this sad point where no one has faith in the government anymore because they haven't given the population anything to have faith in.
Yeah. I mean, I know that there was even a petition at one stage, and I'm not sure if it gained momentum or it died down, because the reality of something like this happening, I'm not sure, where there were a lot of Lebanese citizens that wanted France to actually control or take control back of the governing of Lebanon. I'm not sure that's possible, but the French president was there. He did visit. The relationship is very good between the two countries, but he's even warned, unless you get your politics in order, we can't even help you.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was mentioning about the donor conference as well that took place on Sunday. There was a petition going around for the French mandate to come back into Lebanon. At this point, I think the Lebanese people would accept anything than what they currently have. Some were even saying that a benevolent dictator would be better than the current government. That's how extreme their frustration and their anger currently is. A political analyst called Farah Al-Yafi said it very well in a recent interview. When something bad happens in Lebanon, whether it's a car bomb or an assassination or an explosion, the first thing that people say is, who's trying to kill us this time? And now they're saying, well, it's our government that was trying to kill us. And this mentality is fundamentally wrong. There shouldn't be a need for a nation or population to be this resilient. Yeah. You only get to a certain point where it just becomes too much. And this explosion was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about resilience, and, if there's one thing is the commonality between South Africans and the Lebanese is that effective resilience, that you get brought down and then you rise up again, and you get brought down and you rise up again. But as you say, there is a moment where you can't do that anymore, where you almost feel like, who's helping us? We keep helping ourselves, but who's actually helping us? And that's a question you need to ask. What are the signs? I mean, what do we look out for? Because this is not just a very isolated incident of what's happening in Lebanon. We're seeing this happening around the world. It started with electricity going down in Lebanon. It started with food supplies going down, governments getting swollen and richer and corrupt and stealing money from people that's meant to get destined there. I mean, what was happening? Because perhaps it's a lesson for the rest of the world to not allow this to happen.
I think it fundamentally comes down to greed. I mean, it's this ruling class that was essentially running the largest Ponzi scheme known to man. They were inflating their assets. They were defaulting on their debt. And it was the status quo that kept running and running and running. And people got so sort of pacified by it, and they were just running with the train, basically. And then the system fell apart. As you mentioned, the electricity sector. Before this happened, we only had electricity for 2 hours a day. So then you have the generator owners becoming their own mafia and running the prices up as high as they can, because everybody needs electricity, so everybody's going to need the generators. The same thing with water. We had a massive thing with water in that you cannot drink the tap water, so everyone ends up paying twice for water because they have to get municipal water, and then they have to get purified sort of spring water as well for household use and drinking and such. So everything is charged twice. You pay for electricity from the municipality, even though you only have 2 hours of it. And then you also pay for your generators and, of course, the diesel that goes into the generator. So your cost of living just becomes higher and higher and higher, but your income is not matching that.
Yeah.
So all of these have this chain effect, and it's this massive snowball that just keeps getting bigger and bigger, eventually into an explosion like this.
We have to leave it there, but we thank you for talking to us here in South Africa, a fellow South African living in Lebanon, experiencing the situation there on the ground. Mia Verdoorn Shammes, she's a radio broadcaster in Lebanon, also a singer, and also taking on journalism as well, talking to us about what is going on in Beirut, the warnings to look out for. That, of course, unfortunately, can result in a massive explosion, as we saw happening in the port of Beirut a week ago.